Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. There's snow on the ground in Buffalo, and boy,
don't say that.
There is. What am I going to lie to myself? You might believe myself or my lying eyes? No.
I mean, we're cold for like one more day, and then we're getting like high 60s the rest of the week.
I was going to say that we're supposed to get 60 on Thursday, so it'll be melted away.
It's not just that it's cold. It's like 40-mile-an-hour winds that are just ripping right through if you stand outside.
Yeah. All right, Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
So, interesting thing that happened with the Ravens-Steelers game. Apparently, a player who was listed 3 or 4 days ago as ill, turns out he has COVID. Now, they say, well, here's the latest statement from the Ravens. Let's see what that says. I would never intentionally make contact. Oh, this is from the player. This is just about the officials. This has nothing to do with it. So there's a player who played in the game against the Steelers who has COVID, Marlon Humphrey, and this now. Oh, so wait, maybe this statement does count for him saying making contact. He must have made contact with someone too, and he has COVID, and so he played in a game, most likely knowing that he had COVID because he was on the injury report but listed with an illness.
Well, this is Justin Turner all over again, isn't it? In a way, because there is still, and the focus is off of them now because they've won and everybody's gone their separate ways. But there's still conflicting information about when they received the positive. The speculation is they received the notification of the positive on Turner in the second inning, and he played over 5 innings.
I thought it was they received the indication of the test that was uncertain as to in the second inning. Then they had them retest the new sample that got there during the second inning. There was a sample. It was the sample from the current day made it to the testing facility, and they had them expedite the testing of that sample to see whether or not he tested.
Okay, but here's how it worked. Somebody just explained how it worked for the NFL, Tom Pelissero. So the NFL and NFLPA agreed to game day PCR testing for COVID-19 starting in week 6. Week 6. Everyone tests Sunday morning, but don't get results until late Sunday, early Monday. And Humphrey and Packers running back A.J. Dillon played Sunday,
yes,
only to learn that they're positive. So, again, you are now risking an entire league over a failed testing policy, which took until week 6 to even implement. Again, I don't understand these leagues when they just – I don't know if they're not taking it seriously enough. I don't know if they're not smart enough. It's just bad. It's a bad look.
Yeah, it's got – okay. It had. I don't understand. Maybe logistically it's impossible to do this, but you have to have a negative test on game day before you can play.
Right. So how hard is that?
Right.
When is that test given, though?
Well, I'm assuming that depends on the turnaround here. If the turnaround is 48 hours, then the Friday test is the last test. But They can contract it on Saturday or on game day by just
you likely wouldn't show up with a positive test if you contracted it on Saturday or game day. Sure.
And that the turnaround here, again, going back to Turner, the turnaround here is 5 innings. Okay, if say the first test was inconclusive, you could make the case that he should have been taken out of the game when it's inconclusive, but they didn't want to because it was a potential series deciding game. They only found out that it was positive after they processed the retest. It took them 5 innings or a couple hours to do that, and then they pulled him. I mean,
Eric Ebron from the Steelers basically put out a tweet this morning showing a picture of him getting tackled by Humphrey, and saying this isn't 6 feet. And so if there's an outbreak now, it will be over stupidity because we have the technology and they're still misusing it based on timing.
Well, here's the ridiculous thing. The Bills had a minor COVID outbreak amongst one group of players, their tight ends. Dawson Knox, their starter, and 2 of the backups. They were all in the same room doing pregame video work, They all are now on the COVID list. The only guy who wasn't there was Tyler Croft, one of their starters, who was at the hospital with his wife who was having a baby. He was there, so he was separate from the other guys, and he's the one who's played the last 2 weeks, only by happenstance. Otherwise, they would basically have offensive linemen playing tight end the last couple weeks. So, I mean, this is the thing. I guess these teams are doing the best that they can do.
Are they? I kind of question that.
I don't know.
I mean, if I owned a team, I would say the same thing you did. I would basically say, look, if this league testing isn't great, you know what we're doing? We're going to do rapid tests, and we're going to go with those results, and then we'll let the league do their own testing. But clearly the timing on this is bad. And every team can afford to do it. These guys are all billionaires. So, the fact that they're not is just mind-boggling.
All right, one thing. Today is the first day of free agency for baseball, right?
Started yesterday at 5 p.m.
Okay, and there haven't been any signings yet.
Not as far as I'm aware of as of 1:12 p.m. Eastern time, but
not yet.
They haven't. Again, I don't think. I mean, technically, they didn't have the negotiating period, but look, we all know that teams are finding out and players are finding out behind the scenes the level of interest and everything. This is going to be interesting to see, honestly, what kind of dollars are going to be available for players. I mean, and ultimately, the problem is, a couple players may still accept their qualifying offers. There's 6 players that are qualifying.
I only see one possibly accepting it. The guy from the Giants,
Kevin Gausman.
Yeah, I don't see anybody else accepting it.
I don't think Real Muto is accepting. I don't think LeMahieu is accepting. No. Stroman is an outside possibility.
Doubtful.
But I think he'll get more in free agency. So, yeah, I don't – Springer also, I don't see anybody accepting it.
No.
Okay, so give me your wish list. One player for – I know both of you are Mets. So for your particular team, is it the same guy for both of you?
I don't know. I'll go first. It's Realmuto. It's not Springer. Springer's a 31-year-old center fielder. We don't need a guy who could play center field for maybe 2 more years, start to lose his legs, and be on a 5-year deal and have to worry about that. They need to actually do things right here. Even if Realmuto only goes 4 years out of the 5 or 6 that they give him on a deal, that's fine. He's a catcher. Catchers always have a short shelf life. So get the best catcher you can right now for the better pitching staff that you have right now. And that, to me, is the biggest adjustment they can make. They could do other things, but that's the big one I want.
So I would love Realmuto. I just don't know if he's actually going to sign there. I think they may end up with Springer. I don't have a problem with Springer. Russ and I disagree there. If I ended up with Springer and McCann and another piece, I'd be okay with that. They do need arms, which is why they're going to try to bring Stroman back, because Syndergaard's not back until May, maybe June. Steven Matz has fallen off a cliff. And right now you basically have DeGrom and Peterson, and that's it. So
I will say this. I think it was Nightingale reported, and I know he's got some faulty reporting. They're always going to bitch about him. But I think it was him that spoke to a source with Realmuto that basically said, yeah, I want to go back to the Phillies, but if we're going to set a record for paying a catcher in New York, then I'll play in New York. And that's what I expect the Mets will do.
He said the word heroes, not hoagies. So that's kind of the term he used. So,
and I'm going to take it for granted, and I hope I'm right, that the Yankees are going to re-sign LeMahieu. So, I don't think that they're going to be on Trevor Bauer, because he's going to cost $30 million a year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the strategic signing of Alderton Simmons. They need a really good defensive shortstop so they can move Gleyber Torres to second base. And I think they'll fill in with the guys in the rotation. But if they could get, Simmons is basically
they won't try and outbid the Phillies for Didi to get him back?
No. They can.
I think Didi may end up back with the Reds.
I think the Phillies are going to end up with him.
I think the Phillies are going to re-sign him. So
I do. Okay. They really liked him.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, November 2nd, 2020.
I'm Jan Levine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eck will be joining us any moment. We will start with something that Eck wrote about and something we talked about on our Off the Post podcast yesterday with Jeff Merrick, which I would suggest everybody take a listen to. It is a really good half hour of podcast excellence about the Ontario Hockey League. Russ, Lisa McLeod, who I guess is the director of health for the province of Ontario, came out and said there will be no checking in the Ontario Hockey League. And then basically her boss, the premier of Ontario, said not so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it started a storm, and as we know, there's another word that can go in front of that in that entire country. Look, I am not a guy that thinks you have to have that in the game for it to be a good game. I just want to come out and say that. I think it happens organically anyhow, so I don't think you can really stop it. Right. But I don't think it does anything to decrease your chances of getting the virus. I actually think if you're socially distant on the bench, that is a better maneuver than actually worrying about if somebody's checking. Now, if you want to say fighting because they're taking off their helmets, I'm with you. You do that, you take the helmet off, you get suspended for 10 games. That's fine by me. But, otherwise, I don't understand this at all.
And
as Russ said, it's organic, right? How are you going to basically put it into action? Somebody hits somebody bumps into somebody on the ice. Is that considered a body check? I mean, I understand the rationale for it, right? But as others pointed out on Twitter, there's lots of other areas of commingling that you are probably just as worrisome or even more worrisome than necessarily body checks, right? You're on the bench, You're sharing a locker room, there's a lot of other areas and potential components that fall into it in terms of where you could have a risk. A body check is clearly one of them, but unless you're going to eradicate everything else or just don't play at all, right, is really what you're getting to, because there's going to be incidental content irrespective of how you enact in terms of getting rid of body checking in the game.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
And what Jeff said was that this was sort of a tactic to get the OHL to delay their start to February, because apparently their intention was to start in December. And I mean, with the Q started at the normal time, the dub is going to be, I think they're going in January or February as well. And I think that has more to do with the border than it has to do with anything else.
Yeah.
But honestly, I have a feeling that Lisa McLeod is one of these anti-fighting people. And honestly, it's like, I'm sorry, you cannot change the aspects of the game. It's not flag hockey. It's hockey.
The other thing, though, is like somebody saying, what about faceoffs? Honestly, that is short-term exposure. You're talking about 3 seconds at best. And I'm sure these guys will do even better to try and get the faceoffs done quicker. So I'm not worried about faceoffs.
Well, again, but what about if you're digging for pucks in the corner, right? You're not necessarily body checking, right? To me, that's a more likelihood of contact, because
sure,
you're both fighting for a puck. You're not, again, that's close contact, and likelihood is you're going to have at times more than two skaters in a scrum in the corner. Are you going to eradicate that in terms of the ability to potentially?
No, you can't. You just can't. But again, it is short term still. They always say your chances are worse when you're indoors, but it's long term and you're around people long term. At least all of that is short term. Even for a period, it is short term. It's, and will they do something to fix the air in the place as far as ventilation or spray something around the ice? They might. And if they do that, that's probably as good as anything you could do for indoor. Again, this is why you're not really this is why you really shouldn't have big indoor events, because you're all breathing the same air. Now, of course, some businesses will try and install these other things to try and, get you in there. Sorry, you couldn't pay me. I would not be in some of these places. Now, would I go to a hockey arena? Yeah, because it's going to be socially distant. So I think then I would, as a reporter, I would go in, and I think fans will eventually make that decision. But if it became a situation where, you could have a full crowd or something like that, there's a lot of people that won't want to do it.
Well, are they talking about having any fans in the arenas?
No fans right now. But they will eventually. These teams.
Well, eventually is when, though. That's
I know, but that's why they're starting. That's why they're starting in February, because these OHL teams can't survive another season without fans. They're not all financially stable.
I agree, right? So, look. As Mike said, right, there's clearly, we could understand to an extent their rationale. The problem is when you consider the other aspects of the game that entail close contact and probably longer contact than just a body check, you're kind of missing the forest through the trees here.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some signings that happened over the weekend. Victor Olson signed a 2-year contract. He was an RFA, 2-year contract, a little over $3 million for the Sabres. And Russ, right now, with the Sabres getting most of their offseason business done, they're way closer to the cap than anybody expected them to. And again, I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop and then move out somebody, probably one of their defensemen. But, there's not a lot of room around the league, so I don't know if they'll be able to do that.
Right. The one thing I'll say about Olson is this contract will actually be bad if he is only a power play guy. If he is only getting his points on the power play in that second year of the deal, it's going to be an albatross. If he's getting 5-on-5 points, then it's worth it. It's funny. It's like you can no longer say, well, it's only $3 million. It's only for 2 years. It's low risk. Not in the flat cap world, man. Every dollar counts. It really does.
Yeah, but remember, in that second year, as of right now, Hall is gone. Stahl is gone, right? So even if this year, if a lot of his points come on the power play, if there's a turnover of the roster, he's going to be utilized in other situations.
Oh, sure, but then they'll stink
right.
again.
So part of it is, look, we don't know what they're going to do in terms of when it comes to Hall and Stahl.
Right.
We got the rhyming scheme working here very well. But again, look, I actually thought Olson probably could have gotten a little more. I actually think he got a little less than I really thought he was going to. I thought he'd be in the $3.5 million range, in that range, 3.75 given the year that he had, especially slowed a little bit because of the injury that he had. So, look, I think it's a solid contract for both teams. I think Buffalo got him at a nice deal. Olson, we don't know what kind of year he's going to have this year based upon his utilization. If his numbers drop a little bit because of the fact of his utilization,
well,
next year could be a bigger year for him. So he may make out on the back end and build up his resume, for lack of a better term, for 2 years down the road when he's an RFA again.
Well, Hall and Stahl and Reinhart as well, because he's an RFA after.
Right.
But
they have rights as opposed to.
But if they lose all three of them, they're going to stink again. That was
what they're talking about, Russ, is moving Olson from the left wing over to right wing to play with Hall and Michael. So they're projecting him probably to get a lot of 5-on-5 points. We'll see.
Well, he's got to. I mean, this year he literally has to.
Yeah. Couple signings by the Leafs. One, not surprising, extending Joey Anderson for 3 years at $750,000 per. First year, 2 years are two-way. Third year is one-way. Russ, the good thing about this is long-term security for a player who I think is an NHLer. He's waiver exempt this year, so he could be the guy that goes up and down without fear of waivers. And this is a good amount for a guy who I think could be, in the end, could be as much as a third liner.
Yeah, I just hope he gets to play and doesn't become that yo-yo guy and that guy that, the Leafs are paying him, but he doesn't play. I really do hope he gets to play at the NHL level. If he doesn't, then I'm going to say this is another one of those contracts where the Leafs just basically keep a player like Frankie Corrado and never play him. And then the only thing that they say in return is, well, we paid you. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But this guy needs to play.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
I apologize for the delay.
We're just going through some signings here.
Good. Had a big story today, and then I really have fun topic to talk about. So once you get through the signings, I appreciate it.
Okay. We only have one more, so
Cool.
The other one, just briefly, was the Michael Hutchinson signing.
Actually, two more. Sorry.
Two more. Which, Russ, that was purely a qualifier for the expansion draft. Like you said about like a team like the Rangers signing a JF Berube or somebody like that. That's what Hutchinson may not play at all. He might be a guy who just sits on the bench in with the Marlies. But he'll be the goaltender that qualifies as the goalie under contract for an expansion draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Rangers do the same thing with Kincaid, basically, right? Signing him, they can expose him. So Hutchinson's the same thing.
Yep.
The Dominic Cahoon signing was a good one for Edmonton, Jan.
I like that one a lot, actually.
Yeah, I mean, $975. Now, the weird thing is that when Cahoon was not qualified by the Sabres, the chatter here was, they're gonna sign him. They just didn't want to qualify him for whatever he was making, and then nothing ever happened.
They wasted assets. They did.
Yeah, I mean, they basically gave up Evan Rodriguez as a rental and Connor Sheary as a rental for Cahoon, and then didn't re-sign them. So they gave away 2 rentals for nothing.
Yeah,
and he also could have played a fairly prominent role in the bottom 6 for Buffalo. I mean, that's an area still of need. for that team, and he would have been a perfect guy to fill the role, which is what they acquired him for originally.
And last one.
Actually, I want to mention with Cahoon, Mike. So the opposite of Olson, all of his scoring comes 5-on-5, and he actually is like I believe like a top 20 5-on-5 scorer in the league based on his 5-on-5 points. So if he's not, he will be, but he's an analytics darling in that regard. And I think they got a deal here because, again, we talked about Olofsson saying, hey, he's a power play guy. Well, this guy's the opposite. You know, these days, I would rather sign the Cahoons to their deals than the Olofssons to their deals. That's just me.
Right. And the last one is Julius Honka coming back from the SM League to Dallas on a 1-year deal. I believe it's a 2-way deal, Russ. But, I mean, you know, he was – I don't know if the success that the Stars had the last year was a impetus for him to come back. But, yeah, he took a 1-year, 2-way deal to come back to the NHL.
Yeah, it's an interesting fall for him because, you know, he was highly touted – really good skater, really good offensive ability, but he had trouble playing defense. I think it was under Hitchcock that he never really got much playing time. He got buried, and then he had that issue with the team where he wanted to hold out. Right? I think that's what it was.
That's what it was. Yep.
He was holding out, and so
bad combination there. Bad combination. Not good with Hitchcock holding out.
He came crawling back now. He does have ability. If his defense is better, he will eventually get NHL time. So this is, from the Stars' perspective, it's good. From his perspective, he had to.
He had no choice in this one. I wanted to a little bit on the rumor front, too, before I get into my topic here. We are seeing that we were definitely in this stagnating mode, right? And that stagnating mode is definitely, I think, is partially tied to the election, believe it or not, because the funny thing, and that's an odd thing to say, but there's a lot of differing opinions on where the economy is going. You know, that doesn't mean I just talked to 2 owners yesterday who both said, you know, they wanted to wait till after the election to see what they were going to do. But the main thing I think that it's tied to more than anything else, of course, is just the NHL plan.
Is the border.
Is the plan and the border, but the plan is and the plan's tied to the border, of course. So everything is tied to each other. But yeah, the plan is what teams need to know to make these final signings, because these guys are out there. They're willing to wait for that because they know that things get better. They've got time. You know, they all feel like they can. The deals that are there for them now, like for Hoffman, some of the 1-year deals are there now for him, will be there for him in a month or 2 months from now. If things improve drastically, the deals could get better. So I think these are some players. Some of these players too are not wanting 1-year deals, but wanting longer deals, which is another issue, which I think teams are not going to give anybody more than a 1-year deal right now, for sure. So that's a problem too, right? So, well, I mean, I'll be talking to some people today, writing some more rumors about them, and updating the rumor chart later this afternoon as well, because I did talk to a lot on the weekend, so we'll look forward to that. But I thought I would do something fun because we had a couple days here where we are in the stagnating mode, and then watching, of course, with the presidential election going on, which is not something we're going to talk about, but you do hear a lot of this, like, they were showing some highlights of old debates the other day, and they had Ronald Reagan's famous debate and famous line, which he's heard many times, which you've heard many times now, is, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" Right? And hearing this concept, I thought to myself, well, that's something that's interesting that we don't often talk about with NHL teams. Are they better off than they were 4 years ago? We always say, okay, we look back a year, we look in their direction, they're heading, rebuilding and stuff like that. But 4 years is a long time, and it's in NHL, GMs often don't get 4 years to turn teams around. It's not something that happens very often. So I thought it would be interesting to go through some of the teams and ask that question: Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And it's fascinating, I think. So we started with the Atlantic, and I'm doing this alphabetically. But the Boston Bruins, and what I think will be fun is I'll tell you where they were 4 years ago, and then you can tell me if you think they're better off. Because it is interesting to look. You won't remember really where they were 4 years ago. That's, at least I didn't exactly remember where they were. But heading into the 2016-17 season is what we're looking at, And the Bruins heading into that season, they were a hot mess. The Bruins in 15-16, they finished 4th in the Atlantic, out of the playoffs. They had not made the playoffs. And the Bruins also suffered an embarrassing loss that year. That 15-16 year was when they lost to the Canadiens in the Winter Classic at home. Yeah. They were a mess. And the offseason, their biggest signing was, anybody can guess who their big signing was going into
David Backes.
David Backes, right? Going
Oh
into
yeah, I
16,
hated
17. That was their big signing, right? Obviously didn't work out the greatest for them.
The greatest didn't work out at all.
The 16-17 season would then end the Claude Julien era. That's when, who was the longest tenured coach in the NHL at that point, lost his job in February for the Bruins in the 16-17 season. But they did manage to sneak back into the playoffs under Cassidy, only to lose to who in the first round? Think about this. I won't tell you because it's another team in this division we'll get to later. But are the Bruins better off now than they were 4 years ago?
I think they're the same.
Yeah, the difference is that Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, Chara, Rask, they're all 3-4 years older.
Right.
So at that point they were in their mid to late 20s. Now they're in their early 30s, and I think that people are coming to the realization that the best, it's like the Patriots. The best is in the past.
I could see them sneaking into the playoffs and getting an early exit as well. So
if they re-sign Chara, right, which could happen, and Rask plays as he did last year, they have enough surrounding talent around that team to make it right. When they enter the playoffs, when the season ended, they were the best team in the Eastern Conference, right? Yeah. Chara comes back. Let's say Rask was playing great last year. You have Halak as a good backup.
Right.
Granted, everybody's a year older. Marchand's still at what he is. We know what Coyle is. What Krejci had a rebound year last year compared to the year before. I would think if you're projecting longer term, there are issues because we don't know what's coming up in the pipeline to replace some of the older guys. But for a 1 year, hit to try to make a run. This team clearly has all the components to make a run.
Yeah, right. But
Pasternak doesn't help. To me, that's a big piece that's missing.
Pasternak and Marchand are both out probably to start the season, depending on when the season starts. Rask is in the last year of his contract. Chara's 43. I mean, there's a lot of
I just think this team's going to be askew a lot of the year. I don't think.
Well, then you're basically saying if you don't think they're better off than they were going into 16-17, you're basically saying that they're like a borderline playoff team.
Yeah, I'm saying they're a playoff team that could get.
They just snuck in as a wild.
I know, but it doesn't matter. They made it. I'm saying this team will make it, and I could see them getting bounced early. I don't even think Chara's coming back at this point. And just the way that I see this team last year is like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
because these guys have aged way more than what that record was.
And this is a team that won the President's Trophy last year. But I think all the things that have happened to them since have really affected them, and that I think they're starting. I'm not burying them because I have too much respect for the Bruins, but they're in decline. Yeah.
All right. Now moving on to the Buffalo Sabres. All right, the Sabres heading into 16-17. We're coming off a year where they finished second to last in the Atlantic Division. They 81 points. Their failure to do really bad though. Lost out on Austin Matthews. The year before, trying their hardest and not getting Austin.
They lost out on McDavid. They lost out on
this. No, this was the year that they lost out on Matthews and going into 16-17.
Right. They ended up with the 8th overall pick, so they had a very limited opportunity to get Matthews. But they're coming off a 31st place finishes.
Right. The year before that, 31st place. Yeah. This year though, 15-16, they finished ahead. They did finish second to last in the Atlantic. Ahead, obviously, with Toronto behind them.
Yes.
But this 15-16 had been their first year with Jack Eichel.
Yep.
They also lost out, if you remember, to Toronto on Mike Babcock in going into 15-16.
Yes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Their big news going into 16-17 was the hiring of assistant coach Tom Ward and the renaming of the arena to the KeyBank Arena. I was trying to think what they were promoting going into 16-17. Like, this is what's happening this year. We're going to name it.
And their big free agent signing, Kyle Okposo.
Right.
Well, that worked out well.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair on that one, I think, him with his illness really was more of the reason than long-term than anything else.
That's true. And that we really shouldn't be. I mean, that was, so are they better heading into this year than they were that year?
Well,
No.
they were arguably the worst or second worst team in the league. So I think they're about the fourth or fifth worst team in the league now.
I mean, all right, so slightly better.
Slightly better, but potential with Hall and Stahl and.
I think a lot better. I think there's a lot more. I think they're a lot better off hanging.
If they're going to be better scoring, they could still be horribly defensively, and they could still be bad in net.
But comparing it to where they were going into that year,
we have to base it on.
I'm not saying they're a Stanley Cup contender.
No,
I'm just saying.
We have to base it on the last concrete thing that we've seen from these teams, and the Sabres. Missed the 2014 playoffs, so they're one of the 7 worst teams in the league. Now you can say they're a little better than they've been being the second worst team in the league, but they're still bad.
I'll say that'll be more exciting to watch. Whether that's better is up in the air, but clearly, given the offensive talent they've brought in, they'll be much better to watch. But as Russ said, the issues on the back end and in net clearly have not yet been remediated. Right, Ristolainen is a good offensive player, but defensively struggles. Montour is a nice guy they added. Colin Miller they brought in. I think they'll be better, but again, we don't know what Ullmark and Hutton are going to be like between the pipes. And given what we've seen, recency bias, is the major topic here. They were horrible last year. Yeah, they've gotten better.
But they're not. But I think the key question here is better off. And what is better off?
How are you defining better off?
I guess we can define what better off means, right? Like the better off to me means that they're in a better position than they were then. They're like a person would be better off if their finances are better or things like that. They're just in a better situation.
Slightly better, yes.
Slightly better. I mean, they have some good young players coming, right? So they are not.
Yeah, but they have these old players too. Eric Stahl, who's to say he's going to work out?
And remember, it's fool's gold because Stahl and Taylor Hall are 1-year contracts, so they can turn around and then be gone.
Right. Okay.
We thought Taylor Hall would be magic in Arizona, and he wasn't. Then he was a little better when they came back from the pandemic, but that's it.
I agree with you. Detroit Red Wings. 15-16 was the Coach Blashill's first campaign for the Red Wings, right? So they're coming off that season, and that was actually the team's 25th consecutive playoff appearance in 15-16.
Yeah.
They finished third in the Atlantic with 93 points, but there were issues creeping in on the Red Wings, big time. This was the final year of Pavel Datsyuk. So Pavel Datsyuk was gone, traded his salary traded in the summer to Phoenix or wherever.
Yeah.
Their leading scorer for the 15-16 season for that 93-point team was Henrik Zetterberg, who had a total of 50 points in 82 games. Mm-hmm. 50 points. That was their leading scorer for a third-place team. I thought that was pretty crazy.
But they're significantly better than they are now.
Oh, yeah. Now, it's hard to sit there. Now, when you look at where the Red Wings are now, are they better off now?
That team was on a descending platform.
Right.
Now, with Yzerman in, the guys they brought in, granted, a lot of guys on 1-year deals, we all know are going to get, we expect them all to be traded at the deadline to bring in more draft picks. And given the talent that he's starting to bring and knowing that what he did in Tampa, they're clearly ascending, but it's going to take a while for them to get there. If we ask that question in 4 years, the answer sure as heck better be, they're in a much better place.
Yeah, right. I mean, they come up with one of the worst seasons ever in history of the NHL. So,
again,
over minus 100 goal differential. I mean, it's hard to sit there and say. To me, how I wrote it in my article, I think was, are they better off now? Well, they, like you said, I said what you said basically, Jan, that they were a team heading down, and now they're a team heading up because they couldn't be heading anywhere else but up.
No, but I'm going to tell you a quick
now.
Quick story. So at the draft that was in Carolina, I was sitting next to some St. Louis Blues reporter, and he was talking about how they made the playoffs for their 20th consecutive year, whatever it was, 25th. And I'm like, well, that's bad. They shouldn't have. And he goes, why? They made the playoffs. I'm like, because they're not any good anymore. They're on the descend, and you're better off starting to draft better and rebuild instead of ignoring the problem. And what we're learning now is teams like Detroit, San Jose is now heading that way. Teams that have done that for a long time and put off all this stuff so they could be in the playoffs 10, 15 years in a row, there's a massive price to pay, more than there used to be, I think.
No, you're right. Moving on to the Florida Panthers. 2015-16 was actually an amazing year for the Florida Panthers. They finished first in the Atlantic with 103 points. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction. Dale Talon was making all the right moves, and then the Islanders bounced them in the first round.
It's the offside.
Yep, the famous offsides. And Tavares scoring that overtime goal.
Oh yeah, I remember that goal.
They win that game. I think it's a whole different story.
It's and then in the offseason, for some reason that none of us understood, Dale Talon is moved to the background. And at that point, because Talon had built this team into something, and
they went to the analytics crew,
right? And I mean, they were led, and you know who the hero of the 15-16 season was that gave them that first place? Who their best scorer was? Who their top player was?
Their best scorer.
The 15-16, he had 66 points in 79 games. That would be one Jaromir Jagr.
So I can't answer.
God.
Wow.
Jaromir Jagr.
Well, here's the stark difference. Look at the goals against of the Panthers that year with Luongo. He had a .922 save percentage. They were a good defensive team, and this year they could have been one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And they were better off in 16 than they are right now.
You know what their attendance was, Ek? Their attendance that year was higher than last year, but not by a lot. It was a 15,384 compared to a 14,105. Even in a year where they had a good team, they still didn't draw.
Well, what's the arena hold?
16,000.
Yeah. Now the interesting stat from this year was, like you said, Luongo 235 goals against, 920 save percentage, and then in the playoffs, they lose the Islanders, and you would of course look to Luongo, right? Luongo's goals against average in the playoffs 2.05, 930 save percentage. He was better in the playoffs than he was in the regular season, and yet they couldn't score goals to win. They couldn't score to beat the Islanders in that series. So they were better off then, for sure. I think they're heading in the right direction now, for sure.
Capacity for hockey is 19,000.
Right. So 15,384 is pretty horrible.
It's pretty horrible.
Moving on to the Montreal Canadiens. Okay. The 15-16 Montreal Canadiens story was really awful. They were
they had
tons of injuries.
They had your favorite coach.
They did. Michel Therrien led them. Carey Price only played in 12 games in 15-16. Went 10-2 in those 12 games, but this was the Mike Condon era for the Montreal Canadiens, the 15-16 season. He played in 60-some games. And as strange as that all seems, at the end of 15-16, when they finished in sixth place in the division, just above 1 point above Buffalo. They end up in the offseason making a pretty big trade on June 29th, trading PK Subban for Shea Weber. And now they're heading into 16-17 with that. And then they make a free agent signing named Alex Radulov. And they're heading into 16-17 now with a little bit of hope from those couple moves. Same coach, of course, Michel Therrien still. Remember, Michel Therrien the year before had taken them to to 3 rounds in the playoffs.
Right.
So this was a team that went 3 rounds in the playoffs, finished second to last in their division, or third to last in their division, and now in 16-17 finished in second place in their division. It came back with a storming, really great season again.
If we're taking it from the end of the 15-16 season, they're significantly better than they were then, because now they've added Petrie. They've added Edmondson.
1 second, guys. Got to get my dogs freaking out. 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah, they're better. They're better.
They're much better. Now, offensively, I don't know about that, because at that point they had Pacioretty. But
I'm not sure how good of a year he had then.
Pacioretty had 30 goals. Galchenyuk had 30 goals.
Right.
Their leading assist guy was Thomas Buchanitz. You could say that, potentially they could be better because you've got a lot of young guys like Suzuki, like Kotkaniemi, but the established guys are in question in terms of their offense.
Yeah, but I think they have more like 20, 25 goal scorers now than 30 goal scorers then. So I think they're in better shape.
Well, I think we all think Suzuki could be a 30 goal scorer down the road.
They've added the strength on defense, and Price is healthy. So I think they're better overall than they were then. There's a lot.
No one could have seen that success they would have had in that season. The crazy thing about that season, 16-17, was they were in first place in February, and Michel Therrien was fired, and Claude Julien was brought in.
Right, because Julien was fired in Boston.
Right.
It was too good of an opportunity to pass.
Right. So Therrien was in first place. I mean, Julien kept him in. Julien ended up in second place with them, but Yeah, I agree with that. If you look at going into that season, you had to think that you have to have more hope if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan going into this season than you did in that season, even though that season turned out to be a pretty good one for him.
Right.
Next up, the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators finished out of the playoffs in 15-16, a fifth in the Atlantic, and they made massive changes heading into 16-17. Remember Murray, the GM, resigns at the end of the season, 15-16. Right. Dorian's promoted to general manager. He also was
having health issues then, wasn't he?
Yeah. Dorian, he was. Dorian's promoted to general manager.
Yeah.
Guy Boucher is named coach in the offseason.
Guy Boucher.
They go off and they make a trade. They trade a trade that the Jam and Russ will probably be very familiar with. They trade Mikko Zibanejad to the Rangers for Derek Brassard.
So let me set that one up for a second, because when that trade was made, a lot of Ranger fans were not happy because they felt like Zibanejad didn't have this high ceiling. And I remember telling them, listen, what you saw there in Ottawa was not going to be his best. And actually, he exceeded what I thought his best would be. So good for Zibanejad. But I also knew they weren't really playing him right. And Ranger fans weren't against the trade, but they really didn't feel like they got the player that they got now. They weren't like jumping up and down right away.
Well, the hidden thing about this trade, and I noticed it right away when the trade was made, I believe Zibanejad had a year left after this year on his contract, and so did Brassard. Brassard's contract was front-loaded. Zibanejad's contract was back-loaded. So the cheapskate owner of the Ottawa Senators decided, I need to get rid of this guy before I have to pay him.
This sounds exactly like the clip that we would have had.
Don't forget also, they waited till after July 1st for the trade to be announced because the Rangers had to give him part of his signing bonus, Brassard.
Yeah, Mike's being very consistent here. Very consistent.
It was a total money motivated deal. And that's the problem. It's like, I'm sorry, you had a team that got to the conference final, got to within one goal of winning the Stanley Cup or getting to the Stanley Cup final, and maybe a guy like Zibanejad would have been the difference.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? Because so that year they finished 16-17, even though it's a similar story to Montreal, like they had a bad, but they go off and they've ended up having a really great year under Boucher. They finished second behind Montreal. So remember, that was Montreal, Ottawa at the top of the division.
Now, was this the Hamburglar or was this Anderson?
No, this wasn't Hamburglar. That was before that. This is the team though that goes, or is it the Hamburglar? No.
Yeah.
I think it was.
In 16-17 it was, yes.
That's the only reason this happened. That is a complete fluke.
No, it's not. It's not. Hold on a second.
Not?
No, because this is the year that they go to the seventh game against the Penguins. That's not.
No, that was Anderson and Condon when Anderson.
Okay, we're still Anderson.
Yeah. This is No, this they win the first two rounds of the playoffs.
Yeah, Anderson does go on runs, so that's probably what happened.
They beat who they beat? Boston and the Rangers, I think, to get to the Penguins.
Yeah, the Rangers ended up actually blowing that series because of AV had horrific defensive pairing usage repeatedly late in games. They had the fluky goal.
Never seen that before.
That went off the back of Lundqvist in Game 1 by Carlson.
Oh, I remember that goal that went off.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this year their top scorers were Carlson and Hoffman. This leads on to. I mean, they had an epic run. I mean, Game 7 against the Penguins, everything's. So I mean, but again, it's like Montreal. You didn't know that when you were going into the 16-17 season. You have to look at the 15-16. So I mean, I think it's just like Montreal. I think their Senators are better off now than they were then. But the reality is that team ended up being pretty darn good.
I mean, if we're taking it
for
from
1 year, and then they were terrible.
If we're taking it from the end of the 15-16 season, where they were a non-playoff team, they're a non-playoff team now. They have a lot of good young prospects. I think they're pretty much they're pretty much the same.
Okay. Pretty much. What do you think, Jan?
Look, looking back then, they probably thought they were in a good shape also because they had Carlson on the blue line and they had offensive talent around there, right? So they've started to show signs of being able to rebound, though, as we've all said. Having Melnick as the owner clearly is a detriment then and now. I'd have to say then we probably did not think they were going to go on a downward spiral as quickly as they did. So I'd probably still give a slight edge to where they were then, though clearly with the benefit of hindsight, we get to look back and see what transpired and then make calls.
Right. I agree with that. All right, now moving on to the Tampa Lightning. Now Tampa finished in second place in 15-16 behind Florida.
Right.
So they were coming, wait, was it?
Yeah.
Yes, right. 15-16. 15-16 is Florida, Tampa. 16-17 is Montreal, Ottawa. All right, so 15-16, they finished in second place behind Florida.
And they lost
97 points
in the Eastern Conference Final.
Right. No, not the Eastern Conference Final.
Yeah, that was this Game 7 when Stamkos came back.
The Eastern Conference Final was that year. We just said with Pittsburgh and Ottawa.
In 15-16, I'm talking.
Oh, 15-16. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. 2 years now.
That's 4 years ago.
Right. Now this is the offseason that Tampa did a lot of business. Like this is when they signed extensions for Stamkos, Hedman, Vasilevsky, Killorn, and Paquette were all signed going into 16-17. So this was a really big deal. A lot of big signings. And then for 16-17, this was the first disastrous year for Steven Stamkos, who missed all but 17 games.
Right.
That first year, they ended, and the Lightning end up missing the playoffs in 16-17. And this prompts them them missing the playoffs might have been a blessing in disguise and might have led them to an eventual Stanley Cup, because what trade did they make in the offseason after missing the playoffs in 16-17?
Drouin for Sergachev.
Yep. Drouin. That's when they moved Drouin for Sergachev. Remember, this is Montreal. This is first place Montreal.
Which I said was a raping.
And we still and then we've had lots of debates about this. Drouin is better than you give him credit for. But I think that, Russ has often argued the Drouin thing. But
this is the thing about Drouin. Drouin is a talented player. He's not a center, and that's what Montreal traded for.
Yeah, that's the problem with it. I do still like Drouin. I mean, obviously he's not better than Sergachev now, but there's still some good things about Drouin that still could be utilized.
Yeah,
I agree. So Tampa, better off now or better off going into 16-17?
They won the cup. You can't.
It's hard to say they're not better off now.
They're better
despite the fact that they have all these situations, the situation they have to still figure out.
Yeah.
Crazy dogs. I'm sorry. Which brings us finally to our last team, which would be the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well,
last in the alphabet, but not last in our hearts. The Toronto Maple Leafs.
They were the worst. They were the worst team in the league at that point, and now
for 2 years in a row they tried to tank.
Well,
right?
a year and a half.
Okay.
They tried. They
give me 1 second. Keep talking. Sorry.
Yeah. They started tanking in January. They got Marner. They tanked the entire year in 15-16, and they got Austin Matthews. So you have to say that tanking was a good job, was the right thing to do.
That's the one thing the Leafs know how to do.
And Mob Talk Radio says Toronto still sucks. No.
Well, the Leafs were good at tanking. I give them credit for that.
Well, and Marner and Matthews is pretty good result of those.
Oh yeah,
the result is good.
No, it's hard to argue that. Now
Whoa. You don't get to say it's hard to argue that because you were dead set against that.
Yes,
I'm still dead set against it.
Well, too bad.
No, but it's hindsight 2020. I mean, if you win the lottery, yes, it's fine. But the chances of you winning the lottery are not in your favor. So so you can't. But if you win the lottery, of course, if I bought a ticket tomorrow that won the lottery, I would say, and I won the lottery with it, I would say that was a good choice to buy that ticket to win the lottery.
The end result has not justified the means, according to Eck.
Yeah,
right.
I just felt like we needed further clarification of that remark. That's all.
It doesn't. And but at the end of the day, okay, they do end up with Marner. They do end up with Matthews out of those 2 years. And then the next year they signed Tavares, right? So 3 years in a row, they improved their team drastically. Now going on to 16-17, they do make the playoffs for the first time. And they're back in the playoffs, and they lose to Boston. No, they do not lose to Boston.
They lost to Washington.
They lose to Washington. And my official thought was, wait a second, they always lost to Boston, but I forgot that they lost to Washington the first time they got there.
Yeah.
And they played a respectable series against Washington, losing 4-2.
Then they signed Patrick Marleau, and then they lost to Boston. Then they lost to Boston again. Then they lost to Columbus.
Right. Now, the big free agent signing heading into 16-17 after picking up Matthews was who, Mike?
Big free agent signing.
It really wasn't that. It was $10.5 million they put out on the table.
That's more than they spent on.
I mean, not for a 1 year deal, but like over the course.
So.
I'm drawing a blank.
Matt Martin.
Matt Martin.
No, it was
Matt Martin is 2016-17 big free agent signing.
That's how he afforded his house on Long Island.
There you go.
Yeah, a four-year deal, and he was gone after 2.
Yep.
Brad Richards lives in the Hamptons thanks to the Rangers. Matt Martin on Long Island thanks to the Leafs.
Now,
some real estate agent out there.
We have to improve the economy out by me. We need a little help. So
it's always about the man. I want to meet the real estate agents who did well on these things. Because come on, like there's the guys.
Matt Martin lives on Long Island thanks to Boomer.
There you go. So are the Leafs better off now than they were heading into 16-17? Of course they are. Yeah. I mean, obviously they had Matt Martin then, but they have Mitch Marner and John Tavares, and have made some really nice offside.
And Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton,
but they may have hit a brick wall here. Like we'll find out if this year they don't go far, they're going to have to rethink their entire strategy.
I do agree with that. I mean, the kind of moves you made this year. When you bring in Simmons and you bring in Thornton and you're going that way, you are ending a cycle if it doesn't work out.
And I think it's the Dubas cycle. I think this is his last go round. I don't think he's going to get another chance if they have a first round exit. If they get to the second or third, I think he's safe.
Yeah, and if you look at the roster for next year, they have 9 unrestricted free agents.
Wow.
So
and the big one between the pipes where the key decision is going to have to be made.
Including Freddie Anderson and Zach Hyman, two of the keys.
Wow.
And what that tells you is, Russ, if they don't succeed, then next year is the year that they trade William Nylander because they need the money to go and improve.
We're assuming there's a market for William Nylander. I mean, again,
he scored 30 goals last year.
30 empty goals. He doesn't do
not 30 empty goals.
They are.
It's not A-Rod.
If they weren't, you wouldn't be so keen on trading them.
And if he wasn't making $6+ million, you would be so keen on trading him.
Right.
Dollars are going to be the hard part to move.
It's Dubas who still believes in him, and I think there are other teams that respect his ability to score.
Another Freddie Anderson. He's got to prove it in the playoffs.
Sure.
But also not at $6.5 million, which is a big.
Correct.
Which is a big
and Mark in the chat, you're wrong. They will never trade Mitch Marner because they won't get as much back for him because his contract is so big. Nylander is $7 million, which is not abhorrent, and he scored more goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the Marner part.
Now, the one interesting thing to do about that going into that season, I mean, we know they get Matthews. Hey, we know they get Matthews with that first pick.
Yep.
Overall, and the rest of that draft is pretty much awful. I mean, I was looking at this. Like, they have 2 second-round picks. And they have 2 third-round picks. Can we name any of those players that they picked in those?
Igor Korshkov.
Yeah, Korshkov.
Okay, Igor Korshkov.
I talked about this the other day.
And Carl Grunstrom, who they traded to L.A. to get Jake Muzzin.
And he did play in the NHL. So.
All right, so give him that. They got Jake Muzzin out of that.
He's gonna be an NHLer. I think he's a pretty good winger. And then the third-round pick was Joseph Wall, who could be their future.
We don't know how that's going to be.
But he's 21 or 22 years old.
Right.
So we don't know.
It still could take some time.
And Korshkov is I mean, he played in the NHL last year, got a goal in his first NHL game. I think he's an NHL player.
I would say that draft was just a little above average. That's it.
Yeah.
You get Austin Matthews. If you take Austin Matthews away from that, Russ?
If you take Austin Matthews, it's below average.
Well, all I can say is I wish the Leafs would have listened to me at that draft because I would have taken, and Russ can attest to this. I was saying take Carter Hart in the second round.
Yeah, you were.
Right. Yeah, and they also picked up another third-round pick too, and James Greenway.
Yeah, that was a bust.
James Greenway was a bad pick in the end.
That was a Mark Hunter special.
He was a guy that had talent, physical talent, but he wasn't necessarily a good defenseman. And Lou really liked him from when he saw him in the World Juniors and rolled the dice on it.
That was a Mark Hunter special. He saw physical tools and didn't recognize that. That was the tendency of Mark Hunter, Russ. He took so many 6'7" defensemen who had things wrong with them because he saw the size.
Yeah, that's true. That's there's a couple. Come on, guys. I'm home today by myself. Sorry, so I usually have someone to watch the dogs here, but today I'm on my own. So that's the Atlantic Division. And are they better off than they were 4 years ago? Interesting. Like we basically.
I don't know if the whole division is better off. I just did a top 3 prospects for the entire Atlantic Division.
Yep.
They are loaded with prospects.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Yes.
So coming up, they're going to be better off as the time goes on.
I think the Atlantic will be good for years to come. And even if they go through a slight downturn, but they have a lot of good prospects coming. I mean, Ottawa's got one of the best systems in hockey, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you can, Montreal, probably Romanoff is their best prospect.
Yep.
Ottawa, you probably say that Stutzle is.
Yeah.
With the Leafs, it's Nick Robertson, who is, or Rasmus Sandin, depending on your perspective.
Stamkos for Boston.
Stamkos for Boston. Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay was Cal Foot.
Yeah. And Florida.
Is
Spencer Knight.
Spencer Knight and Anton Lundell. Like that's probably a tie at this point.
Detroit is likely Sider or
no, it's
who they drafted this year.
Yeah, Rossi.
And with the Sabres, it's probably Jack Quinn or.
Hey, somebody wrote Boris Kachuk. I did put Kachuk in the top 3 for Tampa. I did.
And I like Taylor Radish as well.
Yeah, Radish didn't make it. He's declined a little bit. There's still something there though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucas Raymond. Sorry,
I said Rossi. I have Raymond as number 1. I know. Bad.
It's an hour.
Right.
It begins with an hour.
So I think this is a fun exercise to do, and then gives you a long-term feeling. It's amazing how things change in 4 years. Like it's just incredible how much this. I mean, with Montreal and Ottawa being at the top of the division in 16-17, and then Florida and Florida being top of the division the year before that, things really change a lot. In 4 years.
But the Sabres are still at the bottom.
Sabres are still there. That's true. The Sabres are still in the same place. Although
this is a good one. Next, so in the chat room, they're saying. Caulfield is objectively better than Romanoff. He's not objectively better because he's going to go back to college because he still has to score a little better and he still has to get stronger. Romanoff's going to play this year, so you can't put Caulfield ahead of him right now. You can't.
You can't. Yeah.
Romanoff played in the KHL, played in the World Junior, and is going to play in the NHL next year. Caulfield's going to be at Wisconsin?
Yeah, he's still at Wisconsin.
Yeah,
still Wisconsin. Okay.
Hey,
well, there you go.
I made the chat room's asking. I made a flub. Rossi Raymond. It's with an R. What are you gonna do?
Wow, man, the chat room is hard on Russ. I'm telling you, they are. You don't get. I mean, it's funny how the internet in general. I mean, we've got great people in the chat room, but you have to remember, guys, that we're each one brain. You are 35 or 40 people in the chat room all the time.
Yeah,
brain. That's much. I'd much rather have 40 brains than one brain any time of the week. I mean, just for memory's sake and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the way the internet works. So we all love it. Without the internet, we wouldn't be here. So that's fine.
It's more about thinking on the fly. Sometimes your brain just doesn't work.
Quick question here, Mike. That's for you in the chat room. I think it's one that always is being talked about. We can go through before we end today. If the Leafs fall next year, who's more in trouble, Shanahan or Dubas?
Dubas.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Shanahan's got a long-term contract. Dubas, I think, has not that really matters, but I think that Shanahan, I think he's relatively safe.
Shanahan's got to pay off an apartment in New York too.
I wonder if I really am curious about like the if Dubas does fail, the future of signing younger GMs, like the concept of, I'm not going to put him with Chaika yet, but there is a concept there. The NHL was always against signing young GMs, always. And now these 2 experiments have gone on, right?
One thing that Dubas can say is that he didn't cheat.
Right.
Look, I would not say Kyle Dubas is a failure.
Yeah.
He's not. And I wouldn't say it's because of his age that maybe he's having mitigating results. That is the market. It's an impossible market to be a GM. And now the Chaika one, if you want to tell me that was a bad experiment, I might agree with you.
I'll say this. Kyle Dubas, if he doesn't succeed in Toronto and gets fired at the end of next year, I think will get another job in the NHL as a general manager.
I don't think so.
I think so. I do think so.
There's the issue with Dubas.
I don't think John Chaika will ever GM.
No, I agree with you on John Chaika. But here's the issue with Dubas is he's not loved throughout the NHL. He definitely has a little bit of the Leafs, and this is because they've been so successful because they've been the Leafs, and because they're so looked upon. They have like they definitely have an us against them type thing. Like everybody is against Toronto, right? Because and it's unfortunate sometimes but the rest of the league sees them as arrogant because they think they're the center of the hockey universe. They see them as like this is the place they are, and Dubas plays into that arrogance way too much.
He's aloof. He's not really arrogant.
He's arrogant, man. I have heard people
I don't think he's arrogant.
I have had conversations with him.
No, I'm not saying with you, but I'm saying when talking to other GMs about trades and things like that.
Okay. I mean, I'm not privy to those conversations. I can tell you that he does not strike me as an arrogant.
Yeah. No, one-on-one, he's not. Yeah. I agree with you. One-on-one, he's not arrogant.
But I think, even on these other conversations, I do think there's an aloofness to this guy's personality because he's looking for one certain thing, and it's hard to get him off that subject. And I bet you when you're trying to make a trade with him, he's not that kind of guy that wants to talk about his whole roster. He called you for one or two reasons. Right. And if you don't want those reasons, he's not going to sit there and jibber jabber with you. Right. I think that's what it's about. His focus is kind of different. I've seen it in person, like at the NHL Combine. I've seen him like by himself, just staring at certain things. And I can tell that he's not in his own world, but, in a way he is.
Oh, yeah, no, he is in his own. And I think there's some things about him that are really great. And I think that, but the issue, but what he doesn't have, and the NHL's just got a weird, the NHL is weird. And just let's face it, it's got its own MO. It's got its own, like, it's like every business, it's got its own like culture, right? And he doesn't fit in with the other GMs at all, to the point where someone said to me one time, like, I called him up and he said, I'm the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't have to do that kind of a trade. That's the kind of that was said to somebody else, like basically, like in a team it's a lesser team that is struggling to get. I'm the Toronto GM. I'm the Maple Leafs GM. I don't have to make that kind of trade. That's not the kind of thing you should say.
Okay, like, that's not fair, but he's still not. Paul Fenton. Paul Fenton's a different. You know what I mean? Like that's a guy that was truly unliked.
But he was unliked, sure. But but Paul Fenton also is a very different kind of character as well. More like a little bit more old school, able to handle some of those old school things. Like there's definitely some issues. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll see where it all plays out. But I think he's okay. I don't think he's a terrible GM. I think he's made some good moves. I don't agree with some of the moves he's made. I thought the Babcock move was gutsy. I think that was a good thing to make. It was a good move that had to be made.
I mean, you knew that there wasn't going to be a long shelf life. Even Mike, who didn't like you and I saying after 2 or 3 years, if there was a problem, he'd be gone. We weren't that far off. On year one, Mike didn't like that, but we all knew that there's a shelf life with Mike Babcock.
Yeah, the Babcock shelf life is absolutely 100% real. So,
and that's why he's not getting a job now, because he's still getting paid. Nobody is going to want Mike Babcock until he's not getting paid anymore, because he's not getting close to that money ever again.
Right.
Yeah.
Apparently the Leafs were not as demanding of, like, when Washington was interested in Babcock, the Leafs were not saying you've got to pay him $6 million to take us off the hook, but they were saying that they wanted him to be paid, comparable to other coaches, so they could get as much off the hook as possible.
Right. So they did 4, they'd probably be okay with that.
Right.
Yeah. But nobody wants to pay 4 for Mike Babcock anymore. That's the reality.
Because there's a lot of baggage there.
Right. I think there is a lot of baggage.
He'll get a job, but he's going to have to make a lot less money.
And he's going to have to do a mea culpa.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd want Don Waddell in the Toronto market. Don Waddell is a super nice guy. He would get eaten alive in the Toronto market.
Really hard to say. I mean, he could probably handle it, but at the same time, he definitely could handle it. But
the problem is, he could handle it talk-wise. After 2 years, when certain things aren't going to happen, they would destroy him. In Carolina, they don't really go back at him for anything that he's done or not done.
Right.
I see articles in Carolina saying their goaltending wasn't good enough last year. That's why we didn't get to the Stanley Cup. But in Toronto, you had those.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the difference. Like, Waddell also has the same thing that Burke has in the honesty gene. Like, Waddell will say exactly what he thinks or what's going on. And sometimes that doesn't work in a market like Toronto, where you have to be a little bit more couth about it all. And Burke's actually better at covering those honesty quips than Waddell is.
Well,
Waddell would come out and say, say some things that
I'm not saying that, I'm not looking past Dubas, because I think that the moves that he's made is going to result in success for the Leafs. But I would think that if and when there is another general manager in Toronto, it's going to be somebody opposite of Dubas. It would probably be somebody with a lot of experience.
I think so too. I think it'll be a heavy experienced guy, and probably from another, like a winning organization type situation. I mean, someone asked, would Lou Lamoriello ever go back there? I don't think he would. No.
Do we know the Tom Dundon date yet for whether he's going to sign or not? Whether he's going to, basically sign on and take that last chunk of the Hurricanes or not?
I haven't heard.
I have not heard that. I'm going to get on that though.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, but if there's a way for him to escape and make more money someplace else, I'm sure he will.
Would you say Brian Lawton for the Leafs job eventually? No, I wouldn't say that either. No, I mean, I think Lawton is
not Dale Talon either.
No, definitely not Dale Talon.
No, I mean, it's hard to say really. Who would go? I mean, are you looking at like really old school, or are you looking at middle old school?
They would go middle school. I think they would go a little older than
middle old school is like the Ron Hextall era of GMs.
Yeah, but not as old as Talon.
Yeah, probably not. Mark Hunter, I don't think so.
No, Stan Bowman.
Actually, Mark Hunter would never want to work for the Leafs again, and they probably wouldn't want him.
I agree with that. Stan Bowman, I don't think would work there at all. In my opinion.
Why is Stan Bowman going anywhere? He's not going anywhere.
Well, I'm just saying if he ever did.
He could. I mean, everybody goes somewhere sometime. Poyle. David Poyle would be an amazing GM for them, but at the same time, who knows what Poyle could do with money.
I heard Poyle will just dissolve into the Nashville organization at some point.
Yeah, I think that he's happy there. Dean Lombardi would be a disaster in Toronto, guys. Dean Lombardi, the thing about him is like, I'll tell you who would, Fuda's an interesting one. Like,
Fuda would be good because he's from the area too, and actually,
I would like him
I think the media would give him a good couple of years, like they gave Dubas before they start hammering him.
Yeah, Lombardi's main goal as a GM, and this is not a knock on him, but just is really what I've heard from so many people. Everybody has their one line. One line about Dean Lombardi is that he will do whatever it takes to survive his job. Yeah, and that's not a bad. That of course every GM.
But he was loyal to a fault. He was loyal to a fault, and the contracts that he gave Richards and Carter and those guys for winning the cup ended up costing him.
Yeah. But he could do it then because once you won a cup, you're not so nervous about your job.
Right.
Before he won the cup in LA, he would look at the moves he made back then. They weren't anything like that.
Mike Milbury.
Peter Chiarelli. There you go.
Mike Milbury. No, Craig Button would be interesting. That would not be bad.
No, I don't think Craig would want it.
It's a hard job, guys. It's like a job. You have to really be a certain kind of personality to do it.
No, Craig would never want it because he couldn't criticize the Leaf general manager then. He would be
right. I would like to see Craig Button though. I think he's one of the smartest guys in the league. I would like to see him as a GM.
Yeah, but he's already been a GM. I don't think he's going to rush to be a GM ever again.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I would say Fuda would be a good pick. That's like your middle of the road guy, but who is like absolutely very, very smart.
Fuda, I could see Hextall getting a second chance in a market like Toronto also.
Hextall in Toronto, man. Can you imagine that? He doesn't communicate at all with the media and doesn't even communicate with his other people in his organization.
No, actually, but see, hold on. He did communicate with the media all the time. He was in the locker room all the time when guys were injured.
He didn't tell us what was going on at all.
That's not true. I think he's not as much as Fletcher, but did more than a lot of other GMs in the league. Now, the stuff within the organization, clearly he's learned from that.
All right, I'll give you this. He communicated on day-to-day things.
Yes,
he did not communicate. He didn't communicate on long-term goals and plans and things like that.
That's true.
At all. Like not even off the record communicate, which is like helpful when some guys off the record will communicate with you with their long-range stuff. And he didn't even communicate with the Flyers about his long-range plans. That's what inevitably killed him. I mean, he had,
fair.
but he was a great He's great at drafting guys. Great assistant GM. I'm not sure he's a head GM. I think, but a really great assistant GM. That's where
he was great as an assistant GM. There's no doubt. I mean, he won a Calder Cup that way, and a Stanley Cup, a couple Stanley Cups.
Yeah. All right, Tom. All the time we have for today, guys. And again, we're not saying that anyone's getting fired in Toronto tomorrow. We're just saying that we're just going down the line. That's a hard job.
I want to stress that. Yeah, Pierre McGuire.
Dubas is fine right now. He's fine, and as long as his team does well again this year, or weller this year, they got to win a playoff round, I think. But if they don't win a playoff round, then we'll be talking about this again. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey, folks. Tomorrow we'll be back with the